crack a few jokes like I do. No, and
We'll crack a little jokey joke.
You know, it's like a stress.
I don't want.
This feels too formal. With the button, it's just like.
Yeah. You better.
I don't like this.
Okay, I'm gonna bring this closer so I can move things. Good evening, everyone. I'm so thrilled to see so many faces here. Food is our friend. We're here to talk about the ASCSU budget. It won't be approved by the Senate for at least another week or so. And so we're gonna talk about the process, what it looks like, what our budget entails, the different kinds of spending that we have, and then go over what the proposed budget for next year is. We'll have some opportunity to ask or to answer some questions. And then we'll give you some different outlets of how to give feedback on the budget and what you would like to see your student fees spent on. Well, do I need to click? Probably. Okay. So we're going to go over some introductions. We're missing some of our panelists. Are you auto moving? Okay. We're going to do our introductions. We're going to talk about what our budget has to do with student voice and democracy. We're going to have an intro to our budget, what it looks like, our spending, etc., the plans for next year, and then we'll do some Q&A, and then we'll tell you how or where you can direct your feedback. Okay. Oh. So we're missing a few people, but I want to still make sure that they're introduced because we have people who do really amazing work in this organization. First, our Director of Governmental Affairs, Ava Wilkins. I'm going to speak a little bit of I'm going to present a little bit of what she was going to have for tonight. We have our President-elect Jakai Nunley, who I hope is just running late. It's his budget that he put together, and so it'd be helpful if you were here. We have our Vice President-elect Braxton Dietz, who's not here tonight. He is actually planning for the All-Star mock trial team on Wednesday. We're up against him. It's going to be great. So he has bowed out tonight. We have our Budgetary Affairs Chair, Jared McLaughlin, here. Woo! We have our accountant, Gavin Lesurf. I'm our parliamentarian. I'm here to kind of facilitate, just to kind of make sure that this has a good flow and that we're, getting through this in a way that's effective. So, okay. So this is a little bit about what Ava wanted to talk about. What does the budget and democracy have to do with each other? The programs and initiatives that we have. A lot of times it's money that makes the world go round. So how well funded a department is can kind of really determine what it's able to do for students. So let me pull up what she had for us. She works really closely with our lobbyists. We hire a lobbyist to advocate for us at the state level, which is a really, really, really cool thing. I think we're the only university in the state of Colorado that does that. So like right now, for example, Colorado is in a budget deficit. So at the state level, she wanted to reiterate that we had a huge increase in Medicaid funding and K-12 funding, but a decrease in higher education. We saw cuts to transportation, infrastructure, marking a drop in priority. So we can see that here in ASCSU with the amount of funding indicated and a sheer amount of programming. It just says, what is the priority? What are the priorities? So she also wants to do a shameless plug for her department. Like I said, they hire lobbyists. That's really cool. We get to do a lot of really cool things. They take students down to the Capitol to testify. They take stances. The Legislative Strategy Advisory Board takes stances on legislation that affects college students. So her department specifically, we're going to use as an example later on, how its funding works, because it's one of the ones that doesn't have a lot of wiggle room. So if you just scale that down to ASCSU, where we're putting our money is indicative of where our priorities are. All right, I mentioned him a moment ago, President-elect Jakai Nunley. So it's a big question, what does student government do with our fees? So we've got this mini agenda. Oh, it's getting easy. So we have this little mini agenda. Jared McLaughlin is going to kind of go over a little presentation of our budget, and then we will move on.
I'm gonna go over
You want to go here?
here.
Okay.
I'm gonna go over here. So Okay, never mind. I'll go back to the middle.
What are you blocking it? What do you mean?
Kind of. I'm tall.
Well, there's
Okay, so I'm just gonna give y'all a bit of a rundown on how ASCSU works financially. We're a pretty big organization, probably one of the biggest student-run organizations on campus. So there's quite a bit of complexity in our finances and just operations in general. So I think that'll be a good primer before we start talking about what we fund. Can you go to the next slide? It might be a bit technical, but I'll try to gloss over some of the less interesting parts. So our budget is a framework for how the ASCSU student fee is allocated. All of you pay, I think it's $23 that goes to ASCSU to put on programming and services for students. And this budget is how we allocate that money. It determines how much money each entity within ASCSU can spend. So we have a variety of different parts of our organization, including the Senate, various executive departments such as Department of Governmental Affairs, Department of Traditions, Department of Basic Needs. And each department or entity gets a certain amount of money that they spend on different programs throughout the year.
Oh, just kidding.
We can skip this part. So this chart kind of outlines the structure of our organization. Similar to many other governmental entities, ASCSU is split into an executive, judicial, and legislative branch. We operate pretty similar to the U.S. or Colorado government, where the legislative branch is in charge of passing legislation and overseeing financial allocation within the organization. The executive branch is in charge of running programs and basically serving as the public face of the organization, and the judicial branch is in charge of oversight for the other two branches and various other judicial duties like running the All University Hearing Board. So we have two different types of spending within our organization. Within each of the entities, there's discretionary spending, which usually has a suggested use, as you'll see in the budget later on. But there's also, is it on here? Discretionary spending is it has a specified use, but it can also be moved around as needed. So these are usually programs that are not mandatory to the operation of our organization. So things like tailgating funds for the previous year. We had about $5,000 to fund student tailgates before all of our football games. But if that money didn't get fully used, or it needed more money for that purpose, we can move it around as needed. And you can see these items here in the green. This is kind of what it will look like later on, so keep that in mind. We also have the designated line item spending, which is there in the yellow. These are things that the Senate decides when we're making the budget, and that funding can't be changed later on except by an action of the Senate. So these are things that we have basically stated that we want this money to go to one specific purpose and not to be used for any other purpose. A good example of this is our lobbyists. We have a contract with a lobbying firm here in Fort Collins, and we pay them about $16,000 a year to represent our interests at the state capitol, within the state Senate and state House of Representatives. And they've done an amazing job this year, which I think is a great use of money. We also have mandatory spending. So this is spending that we cannot change year to year. ASCSU currently has a contract with the Rocky Mountain Student Media Corporation. We pay them about $750,000 a year to run services like the Collegian, CSU TV, KCSU radio station, and their various other marketing and student journalism efforts. We also have a contract with the New York Times and USA Today to provide free access to those services for all students at CSU. And this is kind of the process for how the budget is developed. If any of y'all are, well, I know at least some of y'all are political science students, but for the rest of y'all, If you're aware of how a budget is developed in most governments, it usually starts with the executive branch. The executive will go through and meet with all of their different subordinate departments, and they will basically ask, how much money do you need? And they will take that information into consideration along with their own priorities to create a budget proposal. And that budget proposal will be presented to the legislative branch, in this case, the ASCSU Senate. The Senate will then review the budget, make any necessary changes, and then vote on it, which will be that Senate votes box. And then if it's approved, it moves back to the president where they can either sign it or veto it. And if it's signed, the process is over and the budget has been approved. We are currently in the public hearing part of the process. ASCSU decided this year that we want to mandate there be a public hearing like this where we can solicit student input on the budget. So we actually know what our constituents want. We're not just spending their money however we feel fit without any input from them. So I'm glad you all came tonight.
Give yourselves a round of applause for being here during Dead Week.
Yeah, we can skip this part.
Da-da-da.
This is also pretty technical.
Okay.
And cool. Are there any questions about this process, how it works, and whatnot? Awesome. Now I'll turn it over to Jakai to present the budget.
Woohoo! You got a drum roll. If any of y'all want to look this over, this QR code will take you to this budget as well. Okay. Want to be able to move around, or do you want to? Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
QR code. That's great. 2 thumbs
All right. So my name is Jakai. I'm currently serving as the Chief of Staff for ASCSU, and then as of June 1st, I take effect as your next student body president. I'm excited to talk about the budget today. So we can go, I think we're just gonna go department by department, and we can talk about how Joseph and I broke this up and kind of what all these line items mean. And then we can also talk about the small nuance between, well, hopefully what will be proposed for what's line itemed in yellow, like what we can't touch, and then what can float and fluctuate in the green. So for the Office of the President, we have a total of $46,000, which will be allocated towards the discretionary, the Clinton Fellowship, the Campus Leader Series, and the State of the Association. The reason for the obscene $18,000 in the Office of the President discretionary is so when programs like, I don't know, let's say if Grow the Buffs is going to be happening next year, if programs like needed to float or they needed extra money to go into them, or programs that needed, and it's like a safety net fund, but it's also a fund for things that happen during the year that students may, like programs that we might need on the fly, right? So things that we just haven't thought of right now, but are liable to happen next year, can happen next year, and might happen next year. Aside from that, we have $13,000 in retreats and team bonding. This is the skill building that goes into ASCSU. And in previous years, the nurturing of the leaders who, put forth programming, and honestly, the leaders who lead you all has not been like a top priority. We're looking to prioritize this year, and hopefully we set a precedent for skill building, professional development, and leadership in years to come. So that way, when you come into this space, you feel like you're interacting with people who kind of know how to lead, people who know how to welcome you into a space, people who know how to develop leaders. So that's our thinking behind retreats and team bonding. I believe that line item might have been a little more or less last year, but we had a lot of flex room in this line item last year simply because I didn't do a lot of overspending in that category for retreats and team bonding. I believe on our retreat last year, we spent maybe on the upwards of 10 to 11,000. And last year, when I planned the retreat for all of ASCSU, I think I spent maybe about $7,800 on that retreat. So if anything like that gives you a nuance of idea about how serious I take the student fee that we're allocated, and then how responsible we are with fiscal management, at least from my side, or the way that I've handled student fees thus far. Hope that provides further context. The Quinton Fellowship is a program, it's a retention program that we're working on with CHASA, the Assistant Commissioner of CHASA. His name is Rashawn Davis. He was my high school mentor for leadership, and so now that he's the Assistant Commissioner.
Wait, can you explain what CHAPSA is?
Yeah, getting there. So the Quinton Fellowship, Rashawn Davis is the Assistant Commissioner of CHASA. CHASA stands for the Colorado High School Student Activities Association. Nonetheless, this program is a retention program for students who are in leadership currently in high school who want to come and shadow and see what it's like at the collegiate level. We'll be working on this in tandem with CHASA admissions, and then we're looking to bring on another strategic partner for this. But ideally, the costs for this are double. But CHASA has put up $4,000 also to fund this program to bring students in high school to a college campus to see how leadership is done. Once again, feedback is that leadership development, that professional development thing. So students like you at the collegiate level can show younger students how it's done. So like how it's done, how we do leadership, and how CSU fosters success for students. So that's the Quinton Fellowship. There actually is a program plan for this that has been sent to CHASA, and it's what we've been using to work off of for the Quinton Fellowship. I love to provide that to anybody. It kind of has all the nuanced details of what the program looks like, what it entails. And as of our recent meeting, it'll be a 2-day experience where students come up here on a Wednesday, because that's ASCSU's busiest day. So we have Senate, the executive cabinet, and students will get to see how how student leadership at the collegiate level is run. So that's that program. The Campus Leader Series is one of the big ticket items that me and Joseph ran on. This is the series that ultimately puts student leaders from all around campus in rooms like this to answer the question of how do we shape campus together. So it's a cohesive series of programming that we're actually working on SLICE on. If you guys are familiar with SLICE, they are the Student Leadership Involvement and Community Engagement Office next door. You might get emails from them all throughout the year about different series for registered student organizations and like how we use Ramblink or how to register, how to do all the things for your organization. We're working with them to revamp that series in tandem with ASCSU because ASCSU is honestly the pinwheel for student organizations and student organization success. So we're working with them on revamping that, but tying it in with our own spin and our own unique style. And so the Campus Leader Series is targeted towards student groups to make sure that we're getting everybody in the same room to be successful. The idea for the Student Leader Series or the Campus Leader Series does still stem from that same idea of student empowerment, of leadership development, professional development for student groups. It'll be a series of programming, and I can touch on that a little bit later, but that's well, I can touch on that if anybody has questions, but that's just the overview of what that series will entail. The big event that is comprised of the Campus Leader Series is the Campus Leader Summit. We're going to work on Slice with to make sure that all student groups are in like one room, preferably the ballrooms upstairs, to ensure that everybody's answering that question, right? Of like, how are we going to shape campus together? Like, what are we going to do? What systems are we going to use? How are we going to communicate? And this is from all student orgs and student groups. So no student groups are left out of this. That is the State of the Associations event that happens in ASCSU towards the end of the year, towards the third quarter of the year, so like February, March-ish. But this event basically invites students into any space to say this is what ASCSU has done this year, and it gives them kind of a holistic overview of what ASCSU as an organization has functioned to do this year. So it's kind of like an event like this where we invite university officials, students. Last year we broadcasted it so students can go back and watch. Some of the people up here on this panel spoke last year, and it's all the things. Yep, it's all the things. So that's Office of the President. Our grad affairs discretionary is broken into, or our grad affairs budget is broken into two things. This is the exact same allocation that grad affairs had last year. For those of you who don't know, ASCSU's executive cabinet is comprised of two members who do represent all graduate students. They also happen to serve as the president or co-president of the grad student council. And so there are this year was Bigger and Cassandra. They've also been re-elected. So Bigger and Cassandra will also continue to serve next year as co-directors for graduate affairs, but they also manage a $3,000 discretionary to plan students for grads or to plan programming for grad students. And so what we hope this looks like future forward is more panels about how you get into grad school, how you apply, some of the realities, some of the hard truths of what that step from undergrad to grad school looks like, because that's a reality that students just don't know, especially if you're an undergrad, especially if you're interested. So That's the big thing. And then there's a travel grant for grad students. This is about a $26,000 travel grant as of this year. Last year it was 24. So last year this department had a $24,000 travel grant with a $5,000 discretionary. Just seeing how money was used last year, I think that we thought the allocation for the travel grant was most optimal for grad students, to just heighten that. But anyway, that's graduate affairs. State and local, this is our governmental affairs department. So they usually cover events throughout the year, like evening with the electeds, day at the Capitol, a discretionary for, once again, fluctuations in those events and miscellaneous items, and the lobbyist that ASCSU funds. This is one of the big ticket items in ASCSU. It's a lobbyist, somebody who's actively fighting down at the Capitol, and fighting is not the best use of words that I could have used, but somebody who's down at the Capitol advocating on a continual basis, for us at the state legislature. So this is a service that we do pay for in ASCSU. Once again, it is a service that if you're interested in civic engagement, if you're interested in the whole due process, just do like the whole nine, right? You can come in ASCSU, you can talk to the team of Gov Affairs, Office of the President, about what we're asking them to advocate on behalf of for students. Will you scroll down, whoever's controlling this? And then quickly, I'll touch on environmental affairs. Those of you who don't know, Earth Month just passed. I consulted environmental affairs about how they spent their Earth Month budget this year, and it wasn't too high until we moved some numbers around. But for Earth Month, environmental affairs usually does a series of programming, usually nothing too huge, usually some concerted tabling efforts or something along the sorts. So we wanted to make sure that was included. A discretionary for environmental affairs. Sustainability rounds. Oh, and discretionary also is included in every department this year for our accountant's request, not this accountant, but our professional staff accountant. And it is to do so, one, so our directors who are incoming do have room to implement new programs for students, so things that we haven't seen yet. So for example, instead of Earth Month next year, I don't know what environmental affairs might do, right? But it could be some project along the sorts of, well, I'm no environmental affairs expert, but it could be anything, right? And so this allows them to have that autonomy within their roles and their responsibilities. And then the Generation Consciousness Project. This is a strategic partner that we've been working with for the last semester to gather more information, and we've been working with housing and dining. We've been working with a few other campus partners to instill this next semester, or next year in general, either semester. But it's a project that would allow for reusable, it's either laundry detergent or a laundry sheet. It's some that you put in the laundry machines that will go in the residence halls. And so we're planning on piloting this next year because it can have great impact on students. There's a lot of science, or not a lot of science, but there's a report that our director of sustainability or deputy director of sustainability has been given on the node of generation consciousness that I don't have with me tonight, unfortunately, but if you email me, I can give that to you. Basic needs. For those of you who don't know, I come from the basic needs department. My tenure in ASCSU started as the deputy director of health under Georgia White. And so I have to be love for basic needs. Not my favorite department, but my favorite department. Nonetheless, the discretionary for basic needs, it does include $3,000 for, once again, fluctuations in programs, autonomy in programs next year. But if you don't know, our basic needs is a very robust department. They do things like the pocket pantry. Georgia White, oh my God, a saint. She goes very often to fill up the pocket pantry, but that's all paid from ASCSU funds of some sort. And then we do get restocked from the regular Ramsey Gets Hunger pantry route. Nonetheless, though, comprised of this budget is Wellness Wonderland. That is a new event that we've seen this year, right? So in planning for the budget last year, Braxton and Nick did not know that Wellness Wonderland was coming down the pipeline. So the discretionary in each budget allows for directors to have that autonomy to implement new events, for their interns to implement new events, and for each department to do new things. Wellness Wonderland was one of the first events that was put on by ASCSU in general, I think, this year. And it was an event that had a bunch of partners out on the campus, and then ASCSU was like the main host. But everybody was centered around, and everybody, was joined in around this idea of community building around the fields of wellness, right? So providing sexual health products for students, just general wellness information for students, and it was a pretty cool event. Pocket pantry fulfillment, we've already built this into ASCSU's budget next year. intentionally to do so because ASCSU has allocated money for all pocket pantries on campus next year. And in doing so, we thought about how we could be the best stewards of the money that we get for students. And in theory, we're hoping that with the money that we've allocated to all pocket pantries, that if we could fund our own pocket pantry for a year, that the fund for other pocket pantries around campus could be higher. So those other areas of campus can operate at higher or just higher operational budgets. So that is basic needs. The Senate discretionary has stayed the same as it was in the previous year. It's $2,000. This is separate from the discretionary that Senate has that allows them to fund many bills, the $100,000 discretionary. This discretionary is used to fund things like the food you're eating tonight. So on this side, we have traditions. The discretionary for traditions is $5,000. For evergreen t-shirts, this is something ASCSU does every year. These are the shirts that I don't know how to explain them. They look different every year, but these are like the shirts that are given out to all first years. I believe. Huh? Forever Green. Right. They're the shirts that are given out to all first years. So the Forever Green t-shirts are given out to all first years. And I'm trying to think. ASCSU sends out the form. No. Oh, when you vote, students also pick out the design for Forever Green. So that's a cost that we incur every year. Student tailgating, one of our biggest events last year, and in thinking about how we revamp programming next year to shift for not having the gorilla buffs and then also not receiving our fee increase, so not being able to do rail jam. We did put about $250 more into student tailgating next year. Hopefully that can really bust the move somewhere, but nonetheless, our tailgating for next year will be one of the staples of programming that Traditions does next year. If you don't know what student tailgating is, this is when students before football games crowd I don't know how to explain what this lot is, but it's like the gravel lot or the lot, the small lot right in front of the gravel lot by Braden. This happens right before football games. It's a great time of just camaraderie and all the things. And so Eyeball is like our end of the year celebration for ASCSU, which we invite strategic partners on campus to, student partners, all the things, student groups. Next year we'll also be invited to this. And then Feast of the Food Trucks is another event that we do. This started in collaboration with the Black African American Cultural Center 2 years ago when Dwayne Ruff was the director of Dwayne Ruff now serves as the director of the Slice office. But Feast of the Food Trucks was an event that was started with Maron Siom and Dwayne Ruff. And this event is it's one of my favorite things that I've ever been to on campus, but it happens on the right in front of the rec center usually because we can't do it this close to the Laurie Student Center. But it usually happens right in front of the rec center and we bring a bunch, like maybe, I think it was 4 food trucks. We bring around 4 to, well, for your asking if it was 4 food trucks, I won't give you a range, but we bring about 4 food trucks out and we pay for students' meals that day. And it's usually leading up right up to Dead Weekend. So students can come out, get a meal ticket, get a free meal, and then attend this event. Feast of the Food Trucks, great event, had music, it was very lively, and students were engaged, it was very fun, and it felt like campuses that you see on TikTok, so I wanted to make sure that event was definitely in there. Our marketing department, they contribute, or they have a budget that is earmarked $4,000 for ASCSU gear, event marketing, so events like this would be consolidated under that budget, right, to market it in whatever way they see fit. And then a discretionary for public relations efforts or any multimedia efforts, anything that we would need to do aside from event marketing specific things. Finance has a discretionary of $1,200. Finance's big responsibility is to allocate the $176,000 that goes to $175,000 that goes to the Board of Student Organization funding. This is open to all student orgs. So if you're in the body project, right, like you can apply for funding through BSOF to fund an event, to fund marketing efforts, do all the things. But that's finance's big thing, and so they don't have a large discretionary or large budget because of such. The academics department is not shown here because the academics department in whole has been moved to our Unified Success Department for many reasons, but because the leading reason is because it was a sole department, right? So they only had one director and one person kind of in the department. It kind of felt like they were like this own little island. Like, what do you do on this own little island by yourself? So we moved them to be with a team of people, and I'm going to break that down here shortly. Our court has $1,500 allocated to elections, just marketing it. I don't know, helping out with elections. I don't have much context into how the election budget is spent. I've kept it fairly similar to what it looked like last year, with the subtraction of about $500, and then discretionary of $500 for the court. For our Unified Success Department, we do have a discretionary of $5,000. Once again, this is a new department. It is a revamped department of how our inclusive excellence efforts will look here in ASCSU. And this discretionary allows for student orgs, or not student orgs, I'm sorry, for the director to implement programs that they see fit under this department, right? Per their purview, per the purview of their assistant and, no, they don't have assistant directors, for their assistant directors. This department will honestly be robust next year. And it expands on the work that we've been doing for inclusive excellence in ASCSU by about $10,000. So the academics discretionary will have $1,000 to plan academic programming, be this study halls, be this collaborations with grad affairs for understanding how students get from their then to their now of grad life. So that can, I don't know, that has fluctuation with whoever does that. Something new that is a part of this budget is joint organization programming, and that looks like things like when we partner with the Pride Resource Center on Drag Bingo or any other club that needs that partnership from ASCSU. We have that built into our Unified Success Department to make that happy medium of what joint organization programming looks like. Honestly, we serve as a medium to students to campus, and so I wanted to make sure that there is minimal barriers of entry or barriers of access and collaboration as possible. So that fund is in there for all organizations, but it's more like at the director's discretion. So that is an overview of what the executive cabinet's budget does look like. And yes, if there's any other tabs that you guys want me to explain, we can click on those as well. Okay, so this is,
We don't necessarily. I was just going to click through. If anything excites anyone, you want to talk
It
about.
was mentioned before, but I'll just give a brief explanation of what the Senate discretionary fund is. Can you go to the general tab? Or actually, I think it's a new one, general bills. So the ASCSU Senate, yes, the ASCSU Senate has has $100,000 this year, or we had $100,000 this year to allocate to various projects across campus. This is usually used for bigger things that are bigger than a singular event or need money for a capital expense. So some things we funded are like pocket pantry program, urban farm to support ramps against hunger, a shuttle for disabled students, a student-run EMS service for CSU. So this is kind of aimed at bigger projects on campus.
I don't know if I found the right thing.
yes, you're gonna have to go to the Solve Beats cover budget to see what you're talking about, to see the breakdown, because that's not gonna be in there.
We're talking about this year, last year. Or just in general. Yeah, I think he was just talking about in general.
I know, but if you want people to see the way that it's broken down and what we funded, it'd be nice to show.
Yeah, here, hold on. We have really quick. Okay. We just gave y'all a lot of information. So I'm gonna put up this Mentimeter so that y'all can submit questions. We'll have our panel. Just again, I'll go over really quick since we had some of our people come in late, who we have here and what they can sort of answer. So Jakai, this is his budget. So of course, if you have questions about this budget or anything like that, Jakai is your man for that. We have Vice President Braxton Dietz. He can talk about how the budgets looked last year, how this process looks overall. Jared McLaughlin, our budgetary affairs chair, has just led a really good overall knowledge of like how the money works. And then if you have specific accounting questions about like what we spent on things in the past specifically, or you just want to heckle Gavin, Gavin's your guy for that. So we'll take questions on here, but you can also feel free to raise your hand. I just wanted to make sure that there was like an outlet for people to be able to ask questions in a way where they don't have to feel so on the spot. And so, yeah, Jakai, you don't have a seat. You don't have to stand if you don't want to.
I'm a stand.
Did you get to eat?
Yes.
Okay, good. If anyone needs to take a moment, please go get some more food, and then we'll take some questions.
Yeah.
Where does RAM events and like leftover money fall into the budget?
Yeah, so we don't fund RAM events. So RAM events, I don't
Oh,
know,
okay.
they're not a student fee funded area, but they're not a student fee funded area, but they
They
have their own, but they have their own funds. So they do their own sets of programming throughout their own budget. We don't fund RAM events.
Yeah, I can take that. So the vice president oversees the student fee review board. Student fee review board, 18 fee funded areas across campus, rec center, student legal services, stuff like that. RAM events falls under that. So ASCSU is one of those fee funded areas, just like RAM events is. Yeah.
I know you mentioned that you didn't know exactly what the Supreme Court used for their elections.
Can you use your mic,
Oh,
please? Pretty please. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so you said that you don't really know exactly what made you cut funding from the elections committee to give that discretionary fund after such low voter turnout, especially in elections, with reasons for that maybe marketing, also other things, but I don't know what made you cut that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So all around the board, we had to cut around, I think, $16,000 out of this budget. I don't know, a little more than $16,000. The operating budget for executive cabinet last year was $203,000. We're operating with $176,000 this year. So nonetheless, there were many areas that got cut. Traditions being one of them. Traditions received a direct like $16,000 cut. And so we tried to make as many cuts that were reasonable around the board, just generally. Nonetheless, though, with marketing for elections, all of ASCSU's marketing can fall under the marketing budget for marketing, right? So with things that are like election specific line items, I'm not saying that I know if they used it on tabling or if I know that they used it on putting on an event for elections, right? And so just based on the way that it's been spent in the past and last year, I don't believe that it was spent to, I can give you exact numbers, but in whole, what I'm saying is that it wasn't a justifiable expense to keep the full $2,000. I'd like to provide you the full number. So give me 2 seconds.
Okay, so while he's looking at that, also, we did just pass legislation so that some of our leftover money will be going to help fund the elections.
Okay, so this year, well, as of right now, and this is probably not updated just because the elections just passed, but this year we had about $2,000 in line item for elections, and I don't think that as of right now, as it's reflected in the budget, none of that was spent. This is in the dissolvable deeds cover budget, so feel free if anybody would like to jump in. But as of right now, as it's reflected, that's not in here. So that's why it was made.
Just to give some context to that, they spent almost exactly $1,500 this year in room reservations, equipment rentals to put on events such as debates, roundtables, and whatnot. Those expenses just haven't been fully finalized yet.
Right.
This is why we have Gavin here to help us out.
We do have, I will start making a list because we give some questions online too. So this one's kind of a general question. How do you determine how much money goes into each thing? So basic needs and the food pantries, for example.
So for basic needs, me and Georgia White actually sat down and talked about the basic needs budget. But we calculated it out, and I think it was like if they went bi-weekly, minusing the weeks that we're not in school, they had about $250 to spend on our pocket pantry based on that allotment. For all the departments, I sat down, gave them a call either or through text or email, asked everybody, the current directors, about their department budgets, where they felt like they were at this year with money and funds, and we made decisions from there. So that's for context how we did that. Hayden, you had a question.
I do. I wanted to ask a little bit what went into the decision behind the discretionary budget of each department and executive, as well as judicial and the Senate. I know that judicial was in discussions this year about writing a bill to get money from Senate to fund some of the stuff that they have because they felt like the discretionary budget that they were given was low. So I wanted to see kind of what factored into that decision and why the judicial and legislative branches have equal to or less than many of the executive departments.
Yeah, great question. So I've kept the discretionaries for these departments relatively same to how they were in prior years based on how things were spent. So last year, the Senate discretionary, once again, I don't believe it's updated. So if somebody would like to provide a updated number of what the Senate spent on their discretionary as of right now, I have $70 spent from the Senate discretionary, which was $2,000 last year. But if Gavin or Jared would like to provide an updated number, that would be great. Nonetheless, for the court, not right now, but for the court, I have a $500 discretionary and then $287 was spent from that budget. So that's how decisions were made based on their discretionary. The second part to this is that all of our accounts, well, not all of our accounts, but Tim and FAR requested that we do have a discretionary for each department this year because there are things that do come up that are not necessarily line itemable, and so they have to put them into discretionary. Is there an updated number for court or Senate's discretionary?
I can tell you, we just spent our chunk of Senate discretionary tonight.
Yeah.
And the remainder of the Senate discretionary account for this year is going to fund positions for next year to help increase student engagement with elections.
Is that the legislative cabinet discretionary or the?
Yeah.
Yes, actually both. But
And I can speak a little bit, I don't know if this is exactly the time or the place to do that, but I'll speak a little bit to the Senate side of that. I know that we had some hesitations about funding things just because we felt like we didn't have tons of money to be working with. Like when we moved the Senate meeting to one of the ballrooms because we had high attendance, that came out of the Senate's discretionary fund. And I know that we had some discussions of like funding some exec things. We had some discussions of funding like catering food to Senate and those kinds of things, but often felt like we maybe didn't have the funds to do that. So I would maybe encourage maybe some discussions with legislative cabinet and some of the members of that and what went into some of those decisions. But that's just my 2 cents on that.
Karen, do you still have a question? Okay, we have another one on our mentee. Oh, we have more now. Ooh, okay. There's one on here that's going to take a minute, but it might answer some questions. Okay, so what are the specifics to the Campus Leaders Program? Is there a tangible plan for that yet, or is it just securing the funding for it?
Yeah, so there's a tangible plan for that. So we've actually been in conversations with Slice already. Where we're adding the plan currently, and mind you, this is before like we're actually in office. So this plan right now is about in like we're in the planning phase. We're putting together a committee for this, and so I just met with Gilbert Falcon last week. Gilbert Falcon is the person who runs all of the student org program in the Slice office. We're putting together a committee of folks right now who represent different areas of campus, so athletics, first year, like C4E, key communities. We're putting together a panel, basically, or a committee of people who represent different lives or different walks of campus, and then also working on what student groups we can include and what students specifically we can include in this committee to plan this series of programming. So if that answers anything, we've begun execution on this idea, but we're just putting together a community of folks who will successfully execute this idea.
Amazing. Okay, so
Can I make a quick request that we maybe use a mic for Dakota for disability purposes?
I don't have the mobile one, so we'll have to share this one.
Okay.
That's fine. Okay. We have another one here. Maybe I'll just use this one. Share Braxton. Just kidding. Okay.
happy to.
Okay, so what happens to the leftover money? Does it just roll over to the next year, or is it relocated to areas that need more money? This is kind of a complicated one because there's new pieces as of literally last Senate session.
Yes. What part are you gonna answer? I'll just answer rollover in general. So rollover in general rolls over into the fund balance for ASCSU, and then if that money is not yet allocated before it rolls over, Senate does things, or well, anybody in ASCSU, even students, because students are a part of ASCSU, could write a bill allocating that money to different places in ASCSU. So a little bit of both, I guess, to the questions.
Yeah, it is a little complicated. Every fee area, their unspent revenue on May 31st goes into their budget for next year. And so that's the same with ASCSU. It doesn't zero out, it doesn't go back to students or anything like that. It just kind of keeps accumulating. This year, I think we're projected to have about 10% of the budget roll over, and that's our projection, assuming that everything is spent as it's supposed to be spent. But I think, do you know off the top of your head how much we have remaining? Does anybody know the consolidates? We had a lot more than that. So more than that will roll over from the ASCSU budget. The only exception for that is multi-year bill commitments. And so anytime you write, $15,000 every year for 4 years in a bill, each of those iterations of $15,000 gets pulled from that fund balance. Does that kind of make sense? Is everybody tracking? Or not tracking, let me know. Sweet. How much is that? It's not updated yet. Okay. It has October,
I'm gonna pull it back over here.
end of May. Or end of March, yeah. That's
Okay.
good.
This one is kind of a bigger one. It says, can you go over the payroll tab? Do you feel comfortable doing it?
Yeah. The end of March.
I'm gonna go back. For some reason, that one's already up. Payroll.
Perfect. So here are our payroll allocations. I'm so sorry. I'm not gonna say the wrong things.
We don't have it.
Okay.
I don't know where it is.
So for our payroll,
Will it help you to move this to give you a better
sorry. Okay, so for our payroll allocations, we kept the numbers roughly the same as they looked last year, especially for our friends in the Senate and the judicial branch. I honestly didn't touch much when it came to other branches. I left it to how it looked in previous years, especially because some positions got, or not some positions, but especially because we had to trim off of the budget in the executive, like the spending proposal. So as it relates our summer salaries for Office of the President, well, I don't have that total, but our payroll allocations for Office of the President for summer is $3,300 for President. For fall spring, $12,300. For the Chief of Staff, $2,000. For the summer for Chief of Operations would be $2,000, and then they also have the same $9,300 allocation for their fall and spring like payroll allotment. The administrative coordinator, which is a new position at ASCSU, is 4,500, so the same what deputies make. And then moving forward to vice president for the summer allocation is 3,100. For the fall and spring, it's allocation of $11,000. For the directors, all directors over the summer will make $688 throughout the whole summer. It's an even split between all directors, just so they can all find their footing over the summer and then come back ready to, kind of go hard the fall and spring, or well, fall semester. All directors make the same allocation of $9.1 thousand dollars, and then all deputy directors make the allocation of $4.5 thousand, and then all assistant directors make the allocation of 5.1 flat. For a total of the exec spending proposal of $187,000, which is the same, if not, which is relatively the same, if not the same, as the spending proposal last year.
Okay, so this question is something definitely you'll want to reach out to whoever represents you in our legislative branch. I think is a great way to go, but I'm hearing that probably is being asked so that there's some executives that hear this too. Is there a possibility to add a small fund or reallocate money for a lawyer that would specialize and help advocate for immigrant students?
Do you want to? Well, I'll give institutional context on that, and you can give context on what you want to do. So student legal services is a student fee funded area, and they've been vamping up their immigration law expertise in the past few months, given what we've seen from the federal level. So I've encouraged students who have questions about that to go down to the Student Legal Services office. It's over by the Off-Campus Life and Bookstore and ALPS offices, and then they'll have the answers for that. So your student fees do already fund that, but I don't know what are your thoughts, Chikai?
I can echo that. What I'll also say is that for resources that are provided by Student Legal Services or partners nearby or who are willing to work in tandem with ASCSU. Those are resources that we would love to make more widely commonly known. So if there are resources that people do know of or partners nearby that are willing to collaborate, that we can put in pamphlet style or just general informational style that we can give to students, we would love to do that. So,
Do we have any other questions? Someone has to heckle Gavin.
there, Diane. The question?
Ask me something
Diana has a
super
question. She just doesn't want to ask.
What's the question?
Put it on the here. Hold on.
She wants to know why the PR thing isn't on the.
I was just wondering about the officer PR position for Senate, and I didn't see that position.
I'm gonna.
Well, that's
The funding
That's
already
new.
secured, so I'll be handling that. And don't worry about that.
yeah. So
Oh.
the process is that they'd go work with Tim and Farah, one of the other even ifs, to add a new allocation for payroll under the legislative. We're saying if you go back up like a little bit so they can see it. In here for that position. So
Jared, what did your mic was not on. What were you gonna say about it?
Everyone else get my questions.
Okay. All right, really quick. So you have a few different ways to give your feedback about this budget. One, you can look at the ASCSU Senate website and find who your representative is and harass them. It's their job. They want to hear from their constituents. We do have a form here. We'd love to have your feedback that way as well. And then also when we're voting on the budget, come and give gallery input. This space, these chambers are here for the democratic process to occur. And so it's really, really impactful when students bravely get up here to speak to their representatives. So we've got a couple different ways for you to give feedback. I'll leave this up for a little bit. We'll have our panelists here for a few more minutes if you want to come and chat. And then we'll have another feedback forum for just how this night went and what you'd like to see for next year for the next budget town hall. So I'll give you all a few minutes on that. Can we give a huge thank you to Jakai Nunley for being here and proposing, putting himself out there like this, building his budget. Braxton Deeds, who wasn't going to be here and made it. Yay!
Gonna be here all along.
Jared McLaughlin, who's been putting in a lot of work to make sure that this could be a thing and happen. And Gavin Lasser, who is just over here always keeping us in line with our budget, making us fill out the forms, all the things. Cool. So if y'all haven't gotten something to eat, please get something to eat or take some leftovers home with you. Pretty please. Thank you.
and shout out, round of applause to you for putting together. Look at you go.
Here's our event feedback. Please let us know how we did and then let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Madeline.
Yeah, not so bad.
Not so bad.
Bigger turnout than I actually really thought would show up.
Yeah, I agree, actually.
So please take some food home. Everybody needs to take some food home.
I have a question for you.
For me?
You know, no, not this. You know how much was originally allocated to secret?
Committee head. So
Because I got these numbers and it's huge. Where,
I'm waiting at the current.
Okay.
so, yeah. I think it's